Early problems included constantly pierced primers. These were actually blamed on the ammo at first, but it turned out that it would be the fact that we just had straight up flat firing pins instead of rounded heads. It'd take months to figure out. Also, the new smokeless rounds were eroding barrels fairly fast, so they would try tweaking in nickel content without much success. Suitable proofing charges were not really available, so we didn't have any way to really proof these things, and the stamping tools for the rear sight graduations were tied up, and for good reason. We didn't know what to stamp on them. It is no small thing to figure out the trajectory of a new cartridge and to get it right and marked down across your service arms with the correct average of variance from the ammo. It's a big deal. And so, with the delays from the lawsuits and all the other stuff, and the last little tweaking of ammo and fixtures, and setting up for tooling and blah, we finally have some rifles coming off the line in a form, just incomplete because we got to fix the sights and other stuff, and we finally have some ammo coming in that's all correct. It's time to actually set trajectory and mark out these graduations. The big problem is it's now New England winter, and it is wet, windy, and cold. And cold, by the way, will change the trajectory of the ammo, so you have to sort of go, all right, mathematically, what is this really going to affect the ammo? But you gotta wait till spring to really test the difference. Well, wing it, and keep sort of averaging, and this just, it is delayed, guys. They can't get the numbers down, they can't prove them down until all the way to the spring of 1894. That is a huge delay. Granted, parts are still getting worked on. It's not like you're actually holding up all of production, but it's just another little problem that's dragging the rifle down. Regardless, though, by spring of 1894, we're starting to see a little bit of production, maybe 200 made. And then, slowly, we get into 40 rifles per day. We're starting to really get things rolling. And by the end of 1894, we're cruising right along, so we've got our gun. Now, before I get into too much of that, though, we do have a rare and wonderful model 1892, the original US Krag, in my hands. Should probably take a closer look. So, starting off, it's pretty similar to the Danish model, but there's some pretty big differences. One, the bolt handle is now turned down. That drops us in right at our trigger. Beautiful spot to be. It's just nice, just good ergonomics, and it keeps it tucked up tighter to the gun, keeps it out of the way of your kidneys. Now, opening her up, all the locking action is basically the same, and then for the magazine, we now open down. So this allows us to just sort of take a handful of rounds and dump them into the action. Works out very smoothly versus not having that, but not nearly as fast as, say, stripper clip there in a moment. So, closing that up, again, follow wraps around. And as I close this up, we're going to see that we have a new flag safety instead of that half-cock position. This is much smarter. And if I twist her around, that's going to pull back our cocking piece, lock it open. No bango. Interestingly, on this early model, the 1892, I'm going to decock this gently. Interestingly, there's no provision for this to be turned when she's decocked. So this would be a damage point, especially you can see this is even getting loose. This is a potential damage point that this can get torqued on either intentionally or unintentionally while you're in the decocking position. Now for the magazine cutoff, I guess we should probably take a look at that finally. So I'm going to actually remove this bolt. Now this early extractor is not nearly as flexible as the later ones. So in 1992, it takes a little extra effort to get this extractor out. I'm going to pull it in my lap and do some quick, basically finger busting exercise here. I'm just going to pop that up, twister. There we go. Whew, a little leverage, huh? There we go. So, I just lift her again like I'd done on the Danish. It's just really stiff on these 92s for some reason. So, actually a lot of that has to do with milling and relief cuts that they'll do later on. So that out of my way, I have ammo that I can now more safely place in this action. So, loose round 30-40. Magazine cutoff in the up position is the default at that time. That means it's cut off. So this section here is perfectly flush. I can drag along it and you notice she's not taking up. If I flip her down at this time, let me make sure that she's got center. I flipped her down, she's popped the rim over. I don't have the bolt, so the patented plastic rope is not perfect at this, but you can see I now have the ability to sort of push it forward. It would feed because it would be perfectly supported, but again, this is no bolt, and I don't really want to mix live rounds and bolt. So up is off, down, at this point is on. And that's the way the magazine runs. And be sure to pull this guy right back out. So I'll reset this bolt real quick. And twist it down in and let it pop into place, which goes very smoothly. And we need to talk a few other features. This guy in a moment, but if we get up to the front, the very first version of this gun, this would have been a solid piece. It's actually been cut out, lightning, easier, less wastage, yada yada. So the very earliest ones, this is a nice solid upper band. You'll see that we have a cleaning rod. It is a full-length cleaning rod. That's going to change shortly. And then on the muzzle, I'm sorry, I have a lot of room to maneuver in here, guys. We're actually flat cut at the muzzle. There's no crown or recession there. This is very easy to damage in the field, and it's very unique that we have this feature still on the gun. If I get to the rear, the new cartridge was softer on the shoulder, so they didn't see the need for a curved, fancy butt plate. They just went ahead and did it nice and flat. And you can see very flat, 90-degree almost butt plate, and flat actual metal plate itself. So sharp toe, early features. We're going to see this all tend to go away. Before I get to this next part, I want to make sure I say something. We tend to treat the Krag model and the Sight model as separate, especially for this episode, because there's a lot of sort of interchange between the two. There's basically some pettiness with these sights. So, that said, let's take a closer look. Now, I almost forgot one thing, guys. Real quick. That ejector is just a tipping piece of metal. It's teeter-tottering because of the bolt's position. On the Danish Krag, it has been a spring. So, neat improvement, and it'll get further refined as we go. Now, here's our rear sight. This is the 1892 rear sight. So, Model 1892 rifle, Model 1892 rear sight. It's a slightly tangential sight, so we can get a little tangent adjustment up to 600 yards marked there. And it's in steps, so these are in hard limits. It's not a slope. The reason for that is because you basically pick your spot in a hurry, and you're not accidentally walking up and down by a little bit. You're also able to find it in low light. You can sort of feel where you've ended up. You don't have to actually read the settings. You really can't get a look at the gun. This is a more sort of rapid automatic system. Now, after 600, we pop up our ladder, and then this thing ranges up to 1,900 yards. Red. We're trying to put this stuff red that way. So, overall, not an unusual sight for the time. Certainly unusual for the US. We weren't quite accustomed to these in a lot of ways. We had previously used a different sight that I'll get to in just a second. This push button here can often be a little weak and allow the thing to sort of slide up and down. And the ladder itself, they had to reinforce the spring repeatedly so that it wouldn't sort of pop and walk as you were making your shots. This was an attempt by the US to get away from our winter sight. We really wanted to be able to sort of just have a dumber sight that was much tougher for military service and also easier to make. We'll hear more about the sights later on in the episode. But for now, they're set up, they're working, okay. We're certainly sworn off on the idea of these sort of fixed sights instead of when it's adjustable. And we're ready to roll, right? Turns out we're not hitting where we're aiming because the calculations for the cold weather ammo didn't pan out for the warm weather. It's time to recall all the sights and remark them, regraduate them, and put them right back on the gun. And while we're doing that, it turns out that the barrels are rusting. Apparently the primers have corrosive compounds, and we are not being religious enough about our cleaning. So we barely got a couple hundred guns done, and they're already rusting. So we have to change our doctrine on how to handle cleaning the rifles and maybe look at cleaning up the ammo. But finally we're settled into a gun. We're getting into 1894 deeply. We adopted this 2 years ago. Come on guys, we're ready to rock and roll. Nope, it would take until late 1894 for the bayonet to be ready. This was mostly due to trouble setting up manufacture and delivery of suitable scabbards. With all that finally resolved, Springfield could get the war free for the Army. And surprisingly, the job was mostly done by June of 1895. Cavalry, however, lagged behind. I'd actually like to get into these carvings in a separate episode. They represent a lot of detail we can't fit into this story today, and their impact on the Great War is practically null. So this is not going to be a right-away thing. Just know, however, that they are regularly faked, and so picking up an authoritative book, like the ones listed below, is an absolute must before looking at them. Alright, the Corps Army is equipped, the cavalry, we'll get to them in a moment, but we're on the way. We still have rifle production tooled up, so let's go ahead and start giving these out to the militias and the reserves and Why do they keep mailing them back to us, and why are they all horribly broken or complaining about things that don't seem to be a problem? What happens when you give a rifle like this to an army that had previously only had single-shot big bore guns? Let's take a look. Because, number one, like I said, with this gun decocked, that safety flipped. And so a lot of guys were cranking on this or just dropping it. And these things were getting torn, messed up. So, we're going to do something about that. Number two, just because it is a repeater and we're on a custom, on those trapdoors, there was actually some training to shoot with the middle finger at that time. A lot of people were shooting with the middle finger, and then that way they had their index finger ready for the operating of the gun, and also switching over for loading. So if you're in the habit of bolting down and then using your middle finger here, but not necessarily maintaining that grip on the bolt because you're not used to a bolt, well, what happens is, in order to get that middle finger into the right position, you'll bump up the bolt just a bit. And what's going to happen is, as we pull this trigger and this cocking piece falls, it's going to tug the bolt back into lock. It's going to drop it back down because the whole system is designed to keep us into lock. But with that finger there, it's going to basically slow or retard the fall of the firing pin. That means light strikes that are entirely caused by the user, not by the gun. In addition to that, we're also going to have some trouble with our butt plate. This square butt, when wrapped on the ground nice and hard in the manual arms, well, if you come at this angle right here, boom, hard, with that straight butt, which we are unaccustomed to in the US, you're going to chip that toe right off. You're going to bend this guy, chip this metal, snap that toe off, and these things are chewed right up. I'm very glad that this one's actually still here, because drill really wiped these suckers out. So that would have to be changed as well. And as a matter of fact, to say all that, there's a crack there. Now, last thing that is really a big complaint is this cleaning rod up front. Get that zoomed in. Sticking out like that. Remember, the guns were linked together for stack arms with this swivel right here. That's the thing where you make your little rifle teepee. Other problems, well, lots of little minor things, but hey, when we put it on our shoulder, I get a burn because there's just a little bit of exposed receiver right here that's heating up, and I am unaccustomed to repeating rifle temperatures. So can we get that covered up? Thanks. Great. Another problem, by the way, is that the early ammo was too thin-walled, so occasionally you get case head separations. The back comes written off, gas vents in the system. This is not a well-designed system for gas venting, so oftentimes you'd have it all vented in the magazine would blow open, maybe even get damaged, extra cartridges flying out, terrifying. We need to fix that. So they would thicken up the case walls, but that meant by October of 1895, we're recalibrating the sights again because the cartridge has been changed just a little bit again, and again, we're not that accurate. And this is still just the 1892 sight. So there's lots of little problems chasing into the system, just in terms of education, but also in terms of actual mechanical difficulties and little refinements to manufacture where we're wasting a lot of time on little details in this gun that we don't need to. And the biggest problem, really, is that the US didn't trial this gun properly. We tested it and had trials. And then we announced a winner, and then we went with that. We didn't make 1,000, 2,000, and put them into the field. We just said, well, this is obviously it. We tested a half dozen of them. Now we'll make a couple thousand and hand them out. No, not a couple thousand, tens of thousands and hand them out. We don't see this in other systems. I mean, when we're in Europe, we see, we'll make 1,500 and hand them out for 6 months and see how many of them make it out. So, in a lot of ways, the 1892 is sort of an extended trials gun that became an adopt. It's very odd. It's perfectly good for an extended trials gun. It should never have been adopted as it was. It should have been trial. Anyway, the good news is while all this is going on, we managed to get a little help from an old friend. That's right, Eric Jorgensen had been stopping in periodically to help. He was paying especially close attention to the U.S. needs and helping with setting up manufacture and improvements for two solid reasons. Number one, he and Ole got $1 commission per rifle, so they wanted us to make a lot of them. And number two, he was showing the action to another country and wanted to make sure that he could roll over any improvements into his own designs. That's right, while the U.S. was still fiddling with their extended trials gun and the Danes were just happy with that thing. Well, Norwegians came out with this. This is the Norwegian Krag Model 1894. And again, we're not firing it, but let's go ahead and squeeze it into the lighthouse. With an overall length of 49.7 inches, it's still as long as the others, but it weighs in at 8.8 pounds. Again, 5-round magazine, this time firing 6.5 by 55, a wonderful little cartridge, which was actually the